Joining us now for some analysis is Webster Griffin Tarpley, as promised on Monday. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff. So let me just sum up the case. Zbigniew Brzezinski, Carter's National Security Director, who started the Afghan War. We can talk about this in a minute.
Right.
His son, Mark Brzezinski. These two are both listed as official top foreign policy directors of the Obama campaign. Of course, Obama knows nothing about foreign policy, no knowledge, no experience, so he's going to rely on Zbigniew for the general ideas, and Mark. And Zbignew's new book, The Second Chance, is in effect a scenario for the Obama campaign. Let me just say, we had a candidate who came forward and said, I have no foreign policy knowledge or experience, but I will surround myself with the best advisors, who has now chosen this Brzezinski machine, which has, if anything, a worse track record on these things, which he can go into. And he says, I'll surround myself with these wonderful advisors. And it turns out that this group has a fantasy of world domination through remaking the world, changing the world, suspending corruption, wiping out sin, all of these things. Zbigniew Brzezinski is a direct link of the Obama campaign to terrorism. I hope we've established that Zbigniew Brzezinski is the guru of the entire campaign. In other words, he dominates foreign policy, but he dominates the entire profiles. And the central feature is there's a global political awakening, and people want some intangible quality
there you go.
that Obama might be able to give them. And so we've got Zbigniew Brzezinski officially listed as foreign policy advisor. He's really the dominant personality of the entire affair. Zbigniew Brzezinski, you see, goes very far. He's very public in his support of these terrorists because he's a reactionary, almost a neo-fascist, I guess you'd have to say, and he is a sworn enemy, and his entire life is devoted to this consuming hatred of Russia. How ironic that this should lurk behind those wonderful messianic utopian plans for world reconciliation and world reform that we seem to be hearing from Obama. So I think just this big finger in the terrorist world by Brzezinski, and therefore by the Obama campaign, ought to rule out any support. Now there is this wonderful interview. It's about 10 years old, 10 years ago next week, I guess, in the French magazine Nouvel Observateur. And this is sort of left liberal French magazine. The interesting thing is the following. Brzezinski starts off by saying, most people think, the official version of history, he says, that the CIA intervention into Afghanistan in support of the Mujahideen started after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, which was Christmas 1979, Christmas Eve. But he says, no, that's not the reality. The reality, secretly guarded until now, is completely different. It was on July 3rd, 1979, so practically 6 months before the Russian invasion, that President Carter signed the first directive for secret aid to the Mujahideen, the anti-Soviet forces in Afghanistan. On that day, I wrote a note to Carter in which I explained to him that, in my opinion, this aid was going to cause a Soviet military intervention. That is to say, start a war and create a world strategic emergency. Then the Nouvel Observateur asks Zbigniew Brzezinski, but despite the risk, you supported this covert action. Of course, he likes covert action. He just tried one in New Hampshire. Did you desire the Soviet entry into the war? Did you try to provoke it? He says, well, I wouldn't put it quite that way. We knowingly increased the probability that they would. So he's double talking. Now, the question, the Soviets claimed at the time that they went into Afghanistan to stop the U.S. and the CIA from taking over, and people didn't believe them. But now you're saying that the Soviets were right. They were telling the truth. You don't regret anything today? Now listen to this. Brzezinski says, regret what? That secret operation was an excellent idea. It had the effect of drawing the Russians into the Afghan trap, and you want me to regret it? The day that the Soviets officially crossed the border, I wrote to President Carter, we now have the opportunity of giving the USSR its Vietnam War. For 10 years, Moscow had to carry on a war which was unsupportable by the government. This was a conflict that brought about the demoralization and the breakup of the Soviet Empire. So in effect, he's saying 1 million Afghan dead, 2 to 3 million driven out of the country, 2 or 3 million displaced refugees within the country, 15, 20,000 Soviet dead. This doesn't matter. This was a brilliant success of geopolitics. And they ask him, don't you regret that you supported these Islamic fundamentalists, that you gave them weapons, and you created all these terrorists? Now again, this is operating obviously within the realm of what was known in 1998. And he says, Brzezinski, what is the most important thing in the history of the world? The Taliban or the collapse of the Soviet Empire? Some stirred up Muslims or the liberation of Central Europe and the end of the Cold War? And they say then, Nouvel Observateur, what do you mean stirred up Muslims? We have all said that Islamic fundamentalism is a danger, is a world menace today. Brzezinski, nonsense. Now, you have to remember that Islamic fundamentalism in the present form is largely a creation of Brzezinski himself. He attempted to foment the Khomeini revolution in Iran, which took place during his tenure at the NSC.
Right.
He was an active supporter of the overthrow of the Shah and the coming of Khomeini for reasons that for him had less to do with Iran and even with the oil than it had to do with the idea of unleashing this bacillus of Islamic fundamentalism into the soft underbelly of the Soviet Union, the 5 Central Asian republics, Azerbaijan, and the other Muslim populations of the USSR. So for him, that was the big thing. And I assure you, we could do a whole program on this. Brzezinski called it the arc of crisis. He said all the way from Turkey over to Burma, I guess, the entire southern littoral of the littoral of the Indian Ocean and the Arabian
Muslim
Sea,
world, which also extends, of course, into Western China.
And into Indonesia. I mean, all of this was part of the arc of crisis for him. But in particular, he's targeting also the southern borders of the then Soviet Union.
Right.
And I think what you have to get out of that is that Brzezinski is willing to sacrifice any interest. He's willing to do anything: war, terrorism, adventurism, geopolitics, the betrayal of allies. There's no interest that he's not prepared to sacrifice. So this would indicate, as soon as you had an Obama administration with Zbigniew Brzezinski calling the shots, you would be on a confrontation course with Moscow. But I think if we can actually get some content into the Democratic race over this issue of Brzezinski and war with Russia and geopolitics in general, and somehow also to direct the attention of these naive voters, is if you can't tell what the candidate is thinking, look at his advisors, and you will get a pretty good idea.
Well, unfortunately, the average American voter doesn't look beyond what they see on the television.